Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation today for this webinar, Coming Home and Coming Out During the Holidays. We are so happy to have everyone here for this great discussion with an amazing lineup of speakers to help lead this conversation. This discussion will be recorded and can be viewed after the session as well. Our first speaker is Joanna Riviera, a South American transgender woman who began her medical transition at the age of 15 through black marker hormones and left home shortly after due to family rejection. Through these experiences, Joanna learned the importance of chosen life and found her passion for helping people through her work in nonprofits. She has worked in roles ranging from peer health educator at syringe exchanges to directors of transgender housing at the Ali Forney Center, the first center for transgender non-binary youth in New York City. Joanna is currently the manager of transgender non-binary outreach and community engagement at SAGE, working with transgender and non-binary older adults aged 50 and plus in all of New York City SAGE centers. Joanna is very passionate about working with her community and advocating for the needs that need to be met. Her dream is to someday lead a nonprofit organization serving the transgender non-binary community. Our next speaker is Christie Carter, the Aging and Disability Coordinator at the Milwaukee LGBTQ Community Center. She began her career in the field of education, where she taught English language to learning adults in high school and middle school. Although she has always been an advocate, she had no idea how much her advocating opportunities would expand once receiving her Master's of Science in Education with an emphasis in instructional design. This allowed her to pair two topics near and dear to her heart in her work. Christy is part of both the LGBT and disability communities and uses her personal experiences in both of these groups to aid in advocating for individuals she works with every day. Our next speaker is Sherrill Wayland, the Director of National Education Initiatives, where she directs the operations of programs such as SAGE Care, the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging, and is SAGE's staff lead for the Long-Term Care Equality Index. Cheryl began work with SAGE at the local level in 2008, founding the SAGE affiliate in St. Louis, and became a certified trainer with SAGE in 2011. Prior to joining SAGE at the national level, she successfully led the merger of SAGE in St. Louis with the Missouri Statewide Equality Organization Promo Fund. Cheryl earned a Master's of Social Work degree from Brown School of Social Work, Washington University in St. Louis, and has over 20 years of professional experience in the fields of education, disability, and LGBT older adult advocacy. Our last speaker, Dan Stewart, is the Associate Director of the Aging Equality Project at the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. He is the HRC lead for the Long-Term Care Equality Index, a tool that promotes equitable care for LGBTQ plus older adults in residential long-term care. Dan earned his Master's of Science in Gerontology at the University of Missouri and a bachelor's in psychology at St. Louis University. Through his experience as a Chicano transgender man, his work in the aging field, and his dedication to advocating on behalf of the LGBTQ plus community, Dan advocates for inclusion nationally. I just want to thank all the speakers for being here and to thank all the attendees for joining us today. It really does mean a lot. And to kick off this discussion, we're going to first open it up with the topic of coming home and coming out during the holidays and the best strategies for coming out during the holidays. And we know that when everyone's coming home during these times, it can be very challenging and it can be very stressful just thinking about coming home and coming out. So I want to kick this over to Cheryl for her to talk about ways to ensure your safety, security, and stability when coming out to your family. Cheryl?
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, for the Christopher Reeve Foundation for inviting us to be here today, and it's just really excited to be a part of this work. When we think about coming out, I always like to share that coming out is still a personal decision, and our hope is that no one is ever forced to come out. But we know that oftentimes people are outed by friends and family, and that can happen during the holidays. So, we just encourage folks to really think about, is this the right time? If you are thinking about going home for the holidays and coming out, is this the right time for you to come out? And if you do make that decision to come out during the holidays, have you already talked to some family and friends that, know that you're out, that can help be an ally to you in this process? So it's really just thinking about the timing and if this is really the right time for you or not. And so we don't want to really encourage people to come out unless this is a personal decision that you've made. And I just wanted to kind of open up with those remarks, and I'd welcome others in the group to also share if you have thoughts.
Thank you, Cheryl. And yeah, I completely agree. And making sure that you have a backup plan to ensure your safety and security. If you do come out to your family and it might not go well, you want to make sure that you have a backup plan and individuals you can go to get that support that you need, that you usually get from your family that you might not be getting because of those circumstances. And did any of the other speakers want to touch on that topic at all?
I think just to, to reiterate Cheryl's point of, this is such a moment of coming into your identity of authentic love for self, for resilience that is innate within our community. But part of that is also boundaries and caring for yourself. And unfortunately, while we should be loved and cared for truly as authentic humans, the reality is that there are considerations. In my experience when deciding to come out, I waited outside of a holiday so that when I was many miles away, just as a protective measure. And we'll talk later about, if how do you manage going back into your family afterwards. But just wanting to reiterate and recognizing, seeing you all in the community of it's way more than this is who I am. It's way more to us, but there's also risk involved, and we're happy to support you all in that today, and really excited to be with these folks to share that with you.
Thank you, Dan. And we also know that there's a lot of organizations that you can go to for support too. I know the Trevor Project is a very good organization that you can go to get some of this outside support that you might not be able to receive from your family at that time. And as sad as it is, not coming out during these times of holidays with a lot of family can be the safer option for you in terms of securing your financial security, your housing security, your food security, things that you need to, the basics we need to survive, and ensuring that everyone has access to those basic securities should be your top priority at all times. And while we absolutely do encourage everyone to be open and to be themselves, we want to make sure that you're safe while doing that as well, and especially when coming out to your family. And then some of the questions that I've thought of this is just ways to determine your levels of safety and how to gauge your levels of safety if it might not be ways to just know if it's a safe time to come out and if you have these avenues that you can pursue for coming out within your family. And Christy, did you want to speak to maybe on some of that and ways of determining your levels of safety and looking for gauges of you might be in danger if you come out or not?
Oh yeah, I can definitely. Thank you, Kyle. So one of the things, I mean, like everyone has been saying, it's very important to, be yourself, but also do it in a safe way. And it might not be telling like the whole family. Maybe you trust one person or two people in the family, and you can start that way, or maybe tell that one or that those two people ahead of time, because they can kind of help you if you end up wanting to share and feel comfortable to share to more. They can kind of help you navigate that.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to pose this question to all of the speakers as well. What happens when you are outed, and ways that you can reduce the risk for yourself and reduce the tension and anxiety that comes along with that? And Joanna, did you want to take that, Joanna?
Sure. I apologize for the background noise. I'm currently working from a stage location, and they're doing some they're fixing some things here. But in regard to the question, I was basically outed because of, I was on medical hormones, and my family was noticing a huge difference in me. And, because I did have a privilege to transition at the age of 15, even without family acceptance. The changes were coming very quick because the hormones were changing me before puberty was over. And my family noticed a difference, and I did not feel safe in this space. And I was in Colombia at the time. I had 6 uncles that were very transphobic, homophobic, and they had this idea that unfortunately is too common in my culture in South America, that violence can change someone up. And they would always say things that were very triggering, like, we'll man you up, this can be fixed. And I had to leave, and I actually disconnected from family for 15 years. So I'll speak further on that in one of these upcoming topics. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Joanna. And I think that's a perfect example of what we want to avoid, is anyone being in that situation where they're not safe and where they don't feel safe and where they feel like they need to, unfortunately, disconnect from their family. That's a situation I don't wish upon anyone. And a big part of this topic today is ways to safely come out and come out in the right ways, so that your family members, even some of the less accepting ones, might be able to be a little bit more understanding with some of the tactics and tips that we'll be sharing today. And for the next topic of discussion, if you do choose to come out, making sure you have alternative support systems to go to. And I was curious, and I think a lot of the attendees would be curious too, about what are ways that allies can support you when you're coming out and in this process of coming out to your family members. And I wanted to kick that over to Christy again.
Okay, so thanks, Kyle. As you were talking and I was thinking about what I wanted to highlight here, as far as can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Of course. The main question here is how allies can support you in the process of coming out to your family.
Okay, so how allies can support you when you're coming out. Like I mentioned before, you can share maybe with one or two people that you feel comfortable with. And then if things don't go as positively as, you hope, you can come to them for more support, and maybe they can kind of, maybe they know resources, or they can just kind of support you and encourage you and, be there for you in that way. So that's one way. Also, if your state or local areas have an LGBT center, they can encourage you, because it might be overwhelming, right? If it's something that you've just come to yourself and realize, hey, I'm LGBT, to go, it might be a big step, but they can encourage you and maybe go with you and, be there for you as you experience that as well. So.
Thank you, Christy. And I also, that brings up another topic that I think would be important to address in terms of the family allies and friend allies, and how to develop each of those, because we know developing allies within the family can be a lot more anxious for a lot of people, and can add that layer of they could go to another family member if you don't fully trust them. But the kind of responsibilities of an ally within the family, and then an ally without that's not within the family, like a friend, and the different roles and responsibilities to that. And Dan, did you want to speak to that at all?
Most definitely. I just wanted to, Cheryl, I saw you had your mic off, so I just wanted to see.
Just wanted to share real quick that we've been sharing a number of links in the chat box, and those are links to hotlines. And I would encourage, if you're an ally in the audience today, to make note of these resources that are there that you can share with loved ones and friends that may be coming out. And if you're an LGBTQ person, that may be struggling with coming out during the holidays, or just need somebody to talk to, during the holidays, to also make note of these helplines that are out there.
Thank you, Cheryl. I know that's definitely very much appreciated by all the attendees here, and to the allies and the in attendance as well. And that's another, I think, really important part of this discussion today, is not just providing this information and these insights for the LGBTQ+ community, but also providing some information and insights for the allies and family members and the friends too, because I think what we all realize is that this is not just a one-person effort of coming out. This is something that affects everyone in their lives, and they want everyone in their lives to still be a part of that life. And when you don't have that smooth transition with some of your friends and allies, it can really be heartbreaking. So I think that's another really important part of this discussion. Yes, thank you, Cheryl. And Dan, back to the question of allies within the family and without outside of the family, and just your thoughts on that.
Right. Well, thank you both for sharing that, and really kind of setting that up in the terms of, for those that are both on the call as allies and those that are in the community, there is, especially for the allies, an opportunity to show that respect and care through education. You know, taking the time for yourself to learn more about supporting, learn more about communicating, about language, about the community. And as an LGBTQ person, in terms of trying to find that safe person within our family, you know, it may start off as just a conversation about the topic, you know, and really kind of engaging with the family member just to see where they're at. As Kyle said, and as Joanna was saying, how it's very devastating when you have expectations of someone that is you assume that they'll be welcoming and affirming, but that won't be the case, right? And so, you know, our family of origin allies are critical, especially in those really tense moments in terms of not being seen within your family of origin. But I also find those friend allies, especially those that are having similar experiences, so critical. As Christy stated, there may be a local LGBTQ plus group in your community or even where you're traveling to that can be a source of support. Personally, I've found lots of connections with people online, while social media has its many flaws and intricacies. I have used it as a tool to develop a nationwide network of siblings, trans siblings, of LGBTQ, you know, greater community as folks that, you know, I'm in a tough situation, I can send a direct message to someone and be able to have that support right there. And as you see also in the chat, those are also some options if you want to do a phone call or texting with the Trans Lifeline or the SAGE Older Adult Hotline. So I think for us, in terms of determining who we can go to, I think it's in our benefit to expand that idea of who can be support, and also feeling and being empowered to state your needs and what you want, and you know, stating that you know, this is something that needs to stay between the two of us. And honestly, sometimes it involves being real about that real risk. Because I think a lot of times allies may not even realize, right, what is the reality of LGBTQ plus people coming out. Yes, you know, family, interpersonal distress or things of that sort, but we're talking about, you know, some very real things of losing your housing, being knocked off your health insurance, being, you know, having to leave a precarious situation. And so in developing, it really is a partnership, and honestly, also being open for help too, to have those allies in place before you even get there. And honestly, I would think weeks in preparation, personally, just mentally gearing yourself up.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Dan. And I want to stick with you on this topic as well, in terms of how to introduce your authentic self to your family for your first time. If this is your first time coming home and being openly out, and what are your experiences like with that, and maybe some strategies that you could help share with the audience?
Most definitely. As we've stated and led this conversation to this point, allies are so critical. You know, in ensuring that our identities are being respected, that we are being recognized. I think this is, you know, just speaking from my experience of coming out as queer versus coming out as trans. As Joanna was saying, you know, especially with medical transition, there's only so much that people will not notice. So for folks, it can be really hard for them. For me personally, the first time that I went home to see my family as my authentic self, as Dan, how I'd been living for, you know, 6+ years at that point, was after I was disowned for coming out as trans. So, you know, there's a lot of work and a lot of grief that I personally had to go through, but also being at a place where seriously asking myself, you know, to care for myself, is this a space where even people are deserving to know my authentic self, where I will be honored, where, and that's hard when it comes to our family of origin. And I think there's so much growth and so many resources out there But I think first and foremost is really engaging in your own self-care, engaging in your own support systems, that preparation that, again, unfortunately has to happen a lot of times. But in doing that, I've found that there's an empowerment in knowing that I am going into a situation that many people have gone through that is going to be difficult in some way, because new things can be difficult for people to navigate. And there are going to be moments that we will, be hurt by questions, maybe offended, maybe, not seen. And so in those moments, utilizing those tools, that sense of self, but also allies, are really critical. When I engage with my family, there's a lot of misgendering, and it is hard to speak up in those situations. So I think, as LGBTQ people, as we develop our authentic self, as we build ourselves into who we are, really having that framework is that as LGBTQ people, we are a gift to this world. We are not just, we're not looking for, I guess, tolerance or acceptance in the view of we're just like everyone else, because we're all unique humans. And as LGBTQ people, have offerings to folks. And I think, just for me personally, it's really building that center of who you are, so that when you are in those spaces, at least you can hold on to yourself and then reach out to those allies. Because it's important. And, if you're bringing home a partner for the first time as well, that is also a conversation to have with your partner, and processing beforehand, in kind of game planning, in a sense of, if this were to happen, ideally, hopefully everyone feels comfortable coming out. But, in those situations where you're introducing partners as well, I think, as we're talking and as we've all stated, there's a lot of work that goes beforehand. And I think, just relying on those allies are so critical, and allies being active as well in that support. And I know We're going to be talking about some things that speak to that soon.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a personal bit of yourself with us, Dan. We really do appreciate it. And I think that aspect of another aspect to really consider is bringing home the partner, like you said, for the first time. What's that like? And I was curious if any of you had any direct experiences on bringing home a partner for the first time, or maybe helping someone introduce a partner for the first time with a friend or family member that you knew. And if there was Christy, it looks like you want to have a.
Yeah, it kind of relates to what Dan mentioned earlier. When you have because I have a physical disability, I have cerebral palsy. When you are coming out to family, and you need their assistance to help you get up or get dressed or with your basic needs, that adds kind of an extra layer that if it doesn't go well, can kind of sour or put stress on you. So that's why when I came out personally, I did it one at a time, and I actually called on the phone so that who I was coming out to, they could kind of process it. And then when I came home and I needed help for the holidays or whatever, it wasn't so fresh that as far as that goes. But as far as bringing my partner home, I'll be honest, when I first did that, we just said we were friends, and after, just because I was nervous and I didn't know how it would all work out. And so my dad was like, when I actually came out to him on the phone, like I was mentioning, he was like, oh, so yeah, I kind of noticed that you and your partner were a little bit closer. And I'm really glad that you found, a person that you could connect with. He's like, I always thought you could, but there is the added thing of disability. And I just wanted people to see you for the great person you are. So congratulations. So that was really, but there is that added oh, I need physical help. Will this affect it? And I mean, even when now I'm pretty out and whatnot, but when I meet new people, it's still something that it is somewhat of a struggle, because you have to kind of gauge where people will be and their reactions. Not that I change who I am, but it is something that you have to be aware of. Oh, Kyle, you're muted.
No, I was just going to say very much so. And I think a big part of it is knowing your audience and knowing who you're coming out to, and knowing the people, and trying to kind of anticipate their reactions, I think is a really important step in strategy when coming out safely to family members. And I think we could have a whole other hour-long discussion on disability and sexuality that I know a lot of the attendees would love to delve into, and maybe we'll set that up in the future for all of you. But I'm going to try to bring us back in to topic here. And in terms of, it's great that, Christy, you were able to have that support from your father like that and have that positive influence in your life. But I think another part of the spectrum we need to consider is dealing with antagonizing forces and managing those antagonizing forces in your space. And Joanna, I want to throw this over to you in terms of how to maintain or mend relationships with these antagonizing family members or friends, and strategies to mend those relationships, and when to know to move on and move past these relationships that are becoming more and more antagonizing and toxic.
Right, absolutely. So I've met many people that are very passionate about who they are, after finding themselves, and, being open in any space. And when it comes to family, it hurts when they make a mistake, or that they say something that's inappropriate or something. Oftentimes they are mistakes. I worked in spaces with the transgender community and LGBTQ community in general, in syringe exchanges, youth centers, and now a center for older adults. And I've noticed that generations interfere with these interactions a lot. Like, I've gotten in between conversations between the member of the community and their family members. And it's explaining to them, this is who your family member is. Loving them is accepting them as who they are. They're telling you who they are. Believe them. You cannot change it. That's who they are. And if we make a mistake, we say sorry, and then we work on improving. And, a lot of great things have come from those conversations. If somebody's purposely disrespecting you, that's something completely different. If they are purposely disrespecting you, then you want to do anything as possible to not be around that person. If they're receiving the education and they're still not making any changes, they're also showing you who they are. They're showing that they're not going to respect you as you. And, as I mentioned like earlier, in order for my family to, I didn't see my family for 14 and a half years, almost 15 years, because it was so horrible during the early stages of my transition. And even after almost 15 years of not speaking to them, when I traveled to Colombia just recently and saw them for the first time, there was a lot of misgendering and, oh, our nephew and all this stuff. And it's like, no, I'm not your nephew. I'm your niece. I've been living this way for a long time. I know that y'all have some pictures of me and everything. And I want to keep coming. I want to see y'all more often, but the respect has to be there for that to happen.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the more challenging parts, is knowing when one of those comments is a mistake and when it's intentional. I think is one of the harder parts to decipher when having these conversations with family members or friends. And Dan, I was curious if you had any experiences dealing directly with antagonizing forces and how you confront those individuals and how you deal with those situations.
I think one thing that Joanna was stating, it's really, we're talking about respect here, a big thing of being respected as a human. And I think sometimes it does necessitate of, this is who I am, and if you cannot accept it, this is the end of our relationship, which is painful, which is hard, but sometimes that is necessary. We've talked about, physical safety, about housing, things of that sort, but also your emotional health, your emotional reserves. And that being said, though, kind of taking a step back and really determining when that it's safe to do or not. You know, there are situations where it is a very real risk. As LGBTQ people, you know, our risk is not just discrimination and stigma, it's violence. You know, it can be, we're not just talking about someone saying, I don't like you, right? And so there are situations where honestly you have to leave. And this is where, again, that ally support is, having backup plans and, you know, in that regard, but really also being tuned to how is that relationship outside of your identity? You know, how has that been? Has there been an engagement in your life and who you are? You know, and as you're coming out, also being able to, you know, show some grace to folks and recognizing that for some people, this is very brand new. You know, we may know ourselves for years and years and years, but for folks, you know, they may have an idea of who we are, but not a full view of who we are. And I think it takes time sometimes for folks to engage with that. So, you know, I think in the beginning, when individuals are struggling with, you know, making assumptions about who your partner is, saying your roommate rather than your, you know, your spouse or partner, significant other, utilizing the wrong pronouns or saying the wrong name. You know, I find it beneficial, especially if those relationships feel somewhat safe. You know, you may not feel emotionally safe, but you may be more, you know, physically safe, that sort of situation, is engaging and saying, you know, what's okay and what's not. And that can be really hard to do. That can be really hard to do. For years and years and years, my career has been working and advocating for LGBTQ inclusivity, helping allies how to better support. But there are times where I don't correct people, where I just feel that hurt and just let it go, because sometimes in those moments, you know, you got to take inventory of your own emotional, you know, reserves. I think, you know, often we can talk about as spoons and you know, the idea of what we have to begin with, and some days, you know, dealing with antagonizing forces or ignorant forces may not feel up to it, and that's okay too. You know, it's not okay to have to experience those things, but I know in my experience, I could, you know, get upset at myself because I didn't say anything, right? Or, you know, be upset that I didn't stand up for this or that, you know, making sure that my partner's pronouns are being utilized, that, you know, my name is being utilized. And I, you know, I think as we continue on in this conversation, just really reiterating how precious you all are, right? And being able to share this with folks, but also recognizing that at times, because of that preciousness, you may have to put up hard boundaries, and that are not necessarily easy. I think there are some very clear cut, I'm in danger, I may risk losing this or that. And then also moments where we just have to sit in that discomfort with people, but be perceptive of where's this person coming from? Because I mean, I think in my experience, tone, how people are approaching you, you can see, you know, this person genuinely wants to learn and support me versus this person obviously has a view of who I am and is not here to get to know me.
Thank you, Dan. I think very much to what you said, giving yourself the cushion that you need to feel comfortable. And it's not always about accommodating for other people and trying to prepare them for what for your coming out or for who you are, but it's giving yourself that cushion and knowing when to de-escalate the situation for yourself, for your safety and for your comfortability, on that given day. Because you're right, no one should have to wake up every day and have to fight the battle that LGBTQ individuals fight every day. And it's okay to not have that energy to fight every day, and to take a step back and give yourself a day. And even though, like you said, Dan, a situation or what someone might said definitely hurts, giving yourself the cushion and comfortability to make sure you can safely and get on with your day and move on with your day, because at the end of the day, it is usually ignorance that is opposing the LGBT community. So knowing when to de-escalate that situation for yourself is very important. And Cheryl, I want to kick this over to you too, in terms of how can allies support LGBTQ individuals in situations like that, where there are these antagonizing forces?
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. I oftentimes like to just share that just as LGBTQ folks, we oftentimes have, we don't just wake up one morning and decide we're coming out as LGBTQ. This is oftentimes something that we've thought a lot about and struggled with ourselves and really prepared ourselves for coming out and what that means. For our family members and allies, it's also a process for them to learn and educate themselves and to come out as a parent of an LGBTQ person, or as a friend or ally to an LGBTQ person. And it's their responsibility to take on that education and to learn how to be an ally. It's not our responsibility to teach them. And so, one of the things that I think allies can do is to help educate other family members and friends. If they learn that somebody has had a family member that came out during the holidays and that person is struggling, an ally can step in and help guide that conversation, help provide resources and education. And so I really encourage allies to prepare themselves for being that person that can help others learn. Because again, it's not our responsibility to continue to educate our family members that are struggling. And oftentimes what I'll do is say, here's the link to PFLAG. Go to PFLAG, call PFLAG, get support for you, because your coming out process as a parent or a family member is not my coming out process. It's yours. So own it for yourself and not place that, on the person who's coming out. I'd also just like to add that for LGBTQ folks, coming out is not a one-time event. We come out sometimes every day of our lives, depending on the situation, whether it's at the doctor's office, the bank, interacting with new coworkers, with new neighbors. It can be a coming out process that happens many times, throughout a person's life. And so each situation, brings a new level of stress sometimes that we haven't encountered before. So it's really, preparing ourselves for what it means to come out, on a regular basis and not just a one-time event.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think that's really insightful, because you're 100% right. It's never just a one-time coming out and everyone knows, and you never need to address it again. It's and like you said, it can be an everyday type situation, coming out to your coworkers, coming out to your colleagues, to friends of extended friend circles, just in casual conversation. It's a challenge and anxiety I think a lot of LGBTQ individuals face, like you said, every day. And back to that concept of the allies, and a concept that we talked about a lot is knowing how to be the bouncer as an ally and kind of provide that security for your LGBTQ plus friend or family member. Because as the ally, like Cheryl and Dan just said, it's not always the responsibility, and it should not always be the responsibility of the LGBTQ individual to educate everyone on how to be more open and more accepting, but a role that the ally should take on much more is that educating role and letting people know these are the boundaries that this person has set. Because it's easy for an ally to state those boundaries to antagonizing forces and remain impartial and kind of as an impartial third party. But for an LGBTQ individual, it's a lot more personal, a lot more emotional. It's a much more involved process when you have to educate someone and you get that pushback. It can be very, very antagonizing and very demoralizing a lot of the time too. And but I do want to move on to the next topic of intersecting identities with the LGBTQ community and the disabled community and individuals that are both LGBTQ and disabled. And Christy, I want to pop this question over to you in terms of how LGBTQ plus and disabled individuals identify. Do they identify as LGBTQ plus first, disabled first, or somewhere in between, or not at all? And I'm really curious to hear about this.
Okay, so I'd like to share. So I run an LGBT disability support group, and this is a conversation that support group has a lot. And there is no one right answer. It's kind of very gray, not just a little gray, very gray. And it depends on the individual and kind of where they're at in their comfortability about their disabled identity or their LGBT identity. And it can be, how they identify can be affected by many things, maybe outside pressures from family, different things, how they were raised, things that they see. But it's also it can change or develop over time. But that is one thing that we spend a lot of time talking about. That kind of, it's somewhere kind of on a continuum, I would say. And that's okay. And when folks are sharing about that or asking, I always reiterate that that's okay, that you don't need to be one or the other. You are a whole person. You are an LGBT person, but you also have a disability. And I know for me personally, I identify more with the LGBT piece of me than the disability piece of me. And that's changed over time. But I think a lot of that for me stems from not seeing people that look like me in culture, in TV, in different things. And so being disabled wasn't celebrated. It was only a few years ago that I saw like dolls that were, disabled and in wheelchairs and different things. So for me, I identify more with the LGBT piece of me, but I've learned and kind of accepted and learned to celebrate the disability aspects of my life. So.
No, thank you. And I think that's a very important thing for everyone to do. And that's something we promote very much here at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, is to live your life to your fullest as a disabled individual and to be proud of that. And that is something to celebrate now, just like it is something to celebrate being an LGBTQ individual. These are the differences that make us who we are and that make us so special in what we do. And to lose any part of that, I think, is to lose a little part of yourself. So be proud of yourself and be open with yourself, because the world wouldn't be the same place without you. And it is a much better place with you here and with your self being your full authentic self. So I think that's a message that translates well both to the disability and to the LGBT community. So thank you for your insight on that, Christy, so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And then and within that topic too, noting that it is okay to be fluid in your identity, and that you don't have to, like Christy said, you don't have to choose one or the other, and it can change from any given time. It's okay to be fluid in your identity and who you are, and to find yourself along the journey, I think, is an important note for everyone to take away from this. But then moving on to the next topic of self-advocacy. I think this is a topic that we can all really connect with in terms of speaking up for yourself and speaking to yourself. And Joanna, I wanted to get some of your insight in terms of speaking for yourself and for your rights as a transgender woman, and just all the obstacles that come along with it.
Absolutely. So very early in my transition, I was looking for a job, and I would get called for the interviews, and as soon as I would show up, I would get treated very poorly. And there was one job interview in particular that it broke me. They were concerned about which bathroom I was going to use. And we spent so much time talking about that. Which bathroom am I going to use? Am I okay with using the bathroom in the basement? And everybody was talking, like, like, sometimes you can tell when like everybody's talking about you and making a mockery and all these things. And that's what was happening that day. And I left that job interview. I didn't get the job, so I went through all of that. And then I just gave up on work, and, you know, connecting with other transgender community members. This was, you know, almost 20 years ago. So there was very little visibility on the transgender community. Like the only place that I would really see trans people on TV was like on Jerry Springer, and it was always in that light, you know, that it makes people want to respect us less. And yeah, I was connecting to other trans community, and everybody was doing survival sex work that I was talking to. And, you know, being raised Jehovah's Witness, having to do that work for way too long. And it was very embarrassing for me. That also broke me. And it made me feel that I could never get a job. I was like, and I would hear that from older trans people too. They would say like, this is what we have to do to be ourselves. And that was their experiences. And the cops would harass us all the time, just based on our appearances, based on what we were wearing. And I have seen many people get bugged, go to jail, go to bookings, because they were carrying more than 2 condoms. There was the Walking Well Trans bill that the bill just ended earlier this year. So for decades, the Walking Well Trans bill was targeting trans people. And you know, it was very unparalleled, the amount of trans women of color that were impacted by this. And I've seen it with my own eyes, working in that field. Cops come and only arrest the Black trans women, and everybody else, they're like, just leave, just leave, just leave. And it was very inhumane the way that they would treat us. But it's just when the education isn't there, how can I advocate for myself? What rights do I have? You're set to feel like you have to deal with all this inhumane behavior. So I remember that Housing Works, a very huge health company within New York City, was doing outreach in the Stroll, where people were doing survival sex work. They were doing outreach. We have internships, getting paid $15 an hour. You get a meal voucher. And to me, it seemed way too good to be true. And I was like, well, what is this? What kind of scam is this? And a bunch of us applied. A lot of the older trans women that, you know, they were playing that role of the chosen mother. They were telling us, apply for these internships. These are legit. You get paid and you get out of the streets. And through these internships, they taught us how to advocate for ourselves. They taught us what rights we have. And then you saw a lot more trans people that were becoming employed in these places, helping the community and doing outreach out there, and also advocating on behalf of the trans people that did not know resources existed, did not know that they had rights. And, you know, while working at Sage, I've met a lot of older adults that transition later in life. And, you know, they have experiences where not even trans people were welcomed into gay bars in New York City in the 70s. That's something that I hear so often at Sage. That is something that was happening so regularly. So in bars that were supposed to be LGBT, trans people were not welcome. So then now they are trying to come out in 2021, and they're learning how to advocate as older adults. And it's like, no, you have rights. You have a right to be yourself. You have a right to be your authentic self. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with every word that you said, Joanna. And on the note of the Walking Well Trans bill just being overturned this year in New York, I think is very symptomatic and shows a lot of the issues and obstacles that trans and LGBTQ individuals face every day on a systematic level. And knowing that you have rights, knowing how to speak for your rights, I think is a very important part of that. And the Christie and Reeve Foundation really promotes self-advocacy for disabled individuals. And we really do have a lot of good materials on how to self-advocate for yourself, because that is one of the most important parts of respecting yourself and making sure you're respected, is knowing how to speak for yourself, knowing how to speak for your rights. It's just such an incredibly important part. And knowing that it is okay and you're right to correct people on your rights and to not be walked all over. And letting people know what accommodations need to be made for you. And just And another topic I want to talk about in terms of self-advocacy is how can organizations help advocate for LGBTQ plus individuals and the disabled community. And I want to throw this to really all of you and see what your organizations did and how they helped advocate for LGBTQ individuals and disabled individuals, and what more organizations could be doing on this front. And Cheryl, looks like you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that when we're thinking about coming out in terms of being LGBTQ, but I'm thinking about coming out as a person with a disability inside of LGBTQ organizations, because ableism, it's just as much of a problem and barrier inside of LGBTQ organizations as it is in the broader, community. So, it's really important for LGBTQ organizations to think about how are we, promoting full accessibility and inclusivity and equity for LGBTQ folks living with disabilities. Because many of our programs and services traditionally were not offered in accessible spaces. We really weren't thinking oftentimes about what we needed to do to meet the accessibility needs of our constituencies. And so it's really important that we address ableism inside of the LGBTQ community and be open and accepting of our, brothers and sisters who, are living with disabilities.
Kind of piggybacking off that, Cheryl, I know I've done, thanks to you and Sage, I've done many things through the National Resource Center and the fact sheets. So I don't know if someone wants to put that in the chat, but that would be great if it's not already there. And these fact sheets are about many different topics, but the one that I'm thinking of as Cheryl was talking was how to make your LGBT events more inclusive for folks with disabilities.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Christy and Cheryl. And we are closing in on our time, but there are a few more topics I wanted to address with everyone. And one of the last topics I wanted to address before we go to the Q&A section would be the aspect of chosen family and why chosen families are so important. And Joanna, I wanted to kick this over to you again.
So I'm assuming that quite a few people here have seen the show Pose, which follows the lives of, LGBTQ people and, these chosen families. And that show very greatly shows what it's like. I watched that show and I was like, wow, they really got it. And the reason that they got it was because they have so many people that went through the struggle of transitioning without support from biological family and having to go to chosen family. And I am part of a big gay family, and it's made working at all of my jobs so much greater because I'm already connected to the community. And in our gay families, as we call it, there's always the trans mother, and there's all this respect for our elders that doesn't exist as much. And I hear that a lot from people at Sage. And we create those spaces at Sage and making them accessible to as many people as possible. We hold events in person, and then we use that OWL device to connect them on Zoom. And then we have the option to dial people in because some of our participants can't see too well. It's difficult for them to make that phone call. So we dial them, and all they do is pick up their phone and they're connected to community. And this is how chosen family happens all the time. We see people that we can relate to, that we get to know and love them. And they, a lot of the times they become closer than our biological family. And some people are very lucky. They have the support from the biological family and the chosen family. So it's such a great support system. And unfortunately, I have to log off in about 2 minutes because I'm managing a drag show at the Sage Brooklyn location. And that's also a gay family. The family of Miss Simone, the legendary Miss Simone. She's a 60-year-old trans woman, and she performs down, and she brings all of her friends, and it's beautiful. and they get paid.
No, it really is a great way to support and promote the LGBTQ plus and trans community. And thank you, Joanna, for hopping on with us. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and scheduling around that drag show that I'm sure will be absolutely amazing. I wish I could be there to see it. But thank you for hopping on with us, Joanna. But we're going to continue the discussion until we get some questions coming in and until we hit that time. But I think you Joanna just touched on a really important topic of how important it is to have a chosen family, and then the added benefit of having a chosen family with the support of your family as well, and the importance of that. And Dan, I was curious if you had any insight on just how impactful it could be to have the support of your chosen family as well as the regular family, or on the opposite side of that coin, what it's like to only have the support of your chosen family, and just wondering about any insights you had to that.
Most definitely. I think, you know, it's very prominent in the LGBTQ plus community, but outside of the LGBTQ plus community, we may already have a chosen family, you know, and those are folks that integrate, you know, those that are connected to us, that we've met through the community, partners, ex-partners, friends, and, you know, blood family members as well. And so looking at where we can go from here, I think also expanding idea of who family is. You know, I think as Sherrill and Christy have stated, of often we, even as organizations, may not see the depth or attend to the depth of our community and the different identities that exist in it. And so one thing that, as coming from someone that works with older adults, is the idea of looking to who our elders are. You know, I know that I would not be here alive doing this work, you know, if it weren't for LGBTQ plus older adults and folks that have done this, you know, and I find comfort in knowing that my chosen family members understand, and even if they don't, that they are there.
I think that's such an important part of that. It's just knowing that you have that support. And we did get one comment come in noting the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation Peer and Family Support Program that really does a great job of connecting individuals with similar life experiences. And we are proud to have individuals that are LGBTQ peer mentors on that. So we really do love having that wide diversity in our peer mentors. And it's so great to be able to connect those individuals. But it looks like we are wrapping up here, and I want to thank all the speakers for joining us today. It really means the world, and to thank all the attendees for being here today and listening to us. I hope it was a really insightful discussion for all of you, and I just can't thank the speakers enough, Christy, Cheryl, Dan, and Joanna, for all being here with us and helping lead this amazing discussion. And you can always reach out to me, Kyle Mars, at kmars@christopherreeve.org if you have any questions further, or if you would like to reach out for a similar presentation on our Paralysis Resource Center. And yeah, thank you to everyone for being here, and to the speakers once again. It really means the world to us to have you guys here.
Thank you,
Kyle.